So welcome. I'm Dr. Shanker Vijay, one of the GP IT leads in the ICB. I also am one of the digital transformation leads in NHS England for the London region. And you're here to see and learn about the register with a GP surgery service. Before you get confused, that's not about you registering with a GP, although that may be something you want to do. If you're not, it's about how your patients for your practice can register online through a national product. Throughout this webinar, there's going to be tons of QR codes. So if at any point you want to follow what I'm following, so for example, at any point you want more information here, you can scan that QR code and get more information. There's a test of a version of the system, so you can demo what it's like to be a patient by scanning that QR code. And if you want to know more about me, there you have it there. Right, so let's move on. I'm going to set you all a challenge. I would challenge you that by the time you finish this webinar, you could go live with this system. It is that potentially quick and simple to do. You just need to access your profile manager if you're set up for that, and it can be done in seconds. And throughout, you can see a demo. That's an NHS app walkthrough demo, and that's actually if you want to test it as a trial patient. So you can see how quick it could be. And maybe, when I've done this before, practices have done exactly that. They've gone live, they've just done it, dealt with it, maybe just to avoid seeing me ever again. Who knows? What do we think about when national companies or the NHS tries to create IT? Well, have a look at this video.
He was working on his laptop late one night when his eyes beheld a ghoulish sight. He could not log in despite several tries, and then suddenly, to no one's surprise,
he did the mash.
He did the healthcare mash.
The healthcare mash.
It was a keyboard smash.
He did the mash.
The website would crash.
He did the mash.
And he did the healthcare mash. Could design such a site, so flawed and so sloppy. The code is so ancient, perhaps it was Hammurabi. He tried to apply, but the site would suspend. I've seen a eunuch with a more functional front end.
He did the mash.
He did the healthcare mash.
The healthcare mash.
It was a keyboard smash.
He did the mash.
He tried to clear his cache.
He did the mash.
Then did the healthcare mash. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent for a website that has trouble loading. How could the government's web designers create a site with such awful coding?
They did the mash.
Oh, they did the healthcare
The
mash.
healthcare mash.
It was a keyboard
They did
smash.
the mash.
They took all of our cash
They did the mash.
and did the healthcare mash. 3 years really isn't that long to build a website, especially one that has to do one thing. I'm just saying. I met Joe Biden once. Somebody that looked like Joe Biden.
Okay, but being serious, we can all have those sort of fears when we think about technology and IT. I really hope you're going to see from this webinar that none of that applies with this solution. So what we're going to cover is how does it work, why should we use it, and how do we set it up if we're going to use it? And then at the end, sort of questions and some closing links. I'd really encourage you throughout, post any comments, any questions in the chat. We'll try to pick this up, really try to make this interactive so you get the most out of this session. But that video, yes, it was tongue in cheek, but there are some important bits. We've got to think about the patient's journey. How's it work for them, and how's it work for us? So how does this all work? Well, if we look at all the government websites, we've moved on, haven't we? They're all about doing things online, making our life easier. The days of, trying to take photographs of your passport, thinking they're going to be valid and get it renewed. You can do it all online. Renewing your road tax. And the NHS is no different. Now, when we look at websites, it's about doing things. So the NHS has the Find a GP page where already patients can find GPs local to them. So there's a common design style to all of this, common way of colouring the buttons and laying it out. And this is to meet accessibility standards that users or patients with different needs find it usable for them. So what can we talk about as an overview for this service. First of all, it's free. It's absolutely free. It's no cost to practices to use, to go live, and it's for all practices in England. Patients can access it through the Find a GP webpage, through their NHS app, and you'll get a link unique for your practice that you can put in your practice websites, on posters, on messages, so they can be directed straight to how to register. This is all about reducing admin burden. It's one of the key goals for why it was developed, that it's quicker for practice admin staff to manage these forms. There's no handwritten forms that are difficult to decipher. It manages catchment area issues for the practice. It matches a patient to the NHS records 92% of the time. So that means there's fewer avoidable exceptions or rejections for the practices to manage. But still, it's not all about digital. We obviously know that a lot of our patients can't manage digital solutions. There may be other barriers, whether it's digital exclusion or other health inequalities. So there is a paper version of the online form for practices to use as well. So it also means you don't have to keep updating or refreshing your practice's paper version of a registration form. And some of these statistics are really impressive. 95% of patients who use the service are satisfied. It's already handled 1.2 million registrations. 76% of GPs practices feel it's a positive thing. And it takes a patient about 12 minutes to complete it. Now, that may seem long, but when you think about often how long forms are, actually, that's quite a good time. So what are the questions that the form asks and why? Now, this is where I think we come with different perspectives, a bit like me trying to communicate with this bird. We as a practice may think, gosh, we want to ask absolutely everything. The patient has a different view on it. Why are we asking that? How well are they going to answer the questions? Do they understand our questions? So the questions are a journey with insights from everyone, patients, practices, professionals, digital teams, so that it's an optimal solution that meets as many needs as possible, but importantly, it keeps evolving, it keeps improving as we use it more and more, as more patients use it. They're constantly tweaking it, improving it, so that it's not just fixed in time. So I'm going to be very fast on this. I'm going to slide down the following slide like I did this slide and just show you the questions. These slides are all going to be shared with you, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, but you just get a flavour of the questions that have been asked and how it works. So it starts by asking, who wants to be registered? Is it that person, or are they registering someone else for them? And then it encourages them, would they like to use the NHS login? Now, if they do use the NHS login, it speeds the process up for them because it obviously pre-populates some of the details and information for them. But really importantly, you don't have to use the NHS login. That's not a barrier for them. And the form evolves. So if it's a child that's been registered, certain questions will pop up as additional ones suitable for a child. So it's not like there's a separate form for an adult, separate form for a child. It's just one dynamic form that they go through. So it looks at asking about name, date of birth. Then it talks about, again, do they know their NHS number? It's not a barrier. If they don't know it, it can tell them how they can find it, but they can continue without knowing their NHS number. But obviously this improves the first bit of trying to match them. Then it asks if they've been registered with a previous UK GP, their current UK address, and that then helps with the catchment area checks. So really there's two options here. Either a practice from their EDEC submissions are set up as they do not accept any patient outside the catchment area. And if a practice is set up that way, then it gives a bold message to the patient saying that the practice will only accept patients within the catchment area, and it sends them back to find a different GP practice that covers their postcode. But if a practice is set up that they might accept out of catchment area patients, then the patient sees a different message. There's a message that they see saying that that there is outside the normal area for the GP practice, but it tells them that they can continue and the practice may process it, or they could look for an alternative. So you still have some degree of control when you receive the registration. You could still accept it or decline it. The patient's not told that it's guaranteed that you'll accept them out of catchment area, but it gives that flexibility. Then it asks about contact details, gender, ethnicity, language interpreter, if they'd like to change their pharmacy. Now, obviously, if they've moved area, if we didn't think about changing their pharmacy before we know it, at their first consultation, we could be sending the prescription to their old pharmacy in the wrong area, and we've got all the hassle of trying to cancel, reissue prescriptions. So this is a useful step in a registration process. And it guides them through that. If they do want to choose a pharmacy, it helps them find it, gives them details for them. So it's just another step that's done for you and less workload for the practice. Then some GMS 1 type questions. So are they registered with the Defence Medical Services? Emergency contact details. Have they moved recently to the UK? And if so, sort of more details about that. Where were they born? Their current GP surgery that they want to leave, if that applies to them. Medical conditions, and it gives them like a list of ones that may be possible, but really flexibility and a free text box to enter more information. Similar with allergies, mental health conditions, disabilities, have they got a carer, and then the carer details. And the other question, are they a carer? Communication needs of them or even their carers. And then reasonable adjustments. So this is about, any adjustments that we may need to do to help with their care. And this is probably becoming increasingly important. I don't know if you're aware that there's a reasonable adjustment digital flag that's due to be rolled out. So we're probably going to pay even more attention to this in the future. Then about medication. Are they taking any medication, and details about that? Height and weight, which can also flip. They can choose if they want to switch it from imperial to metric measurements. So that's also really helpful. And then alcohol screening, smoking, and summary care record preferences. So what they feel about sharing their records, and helpfully showing them links for more information as well. Now that was the adult flow. In a child registration, a couple of other sort of questions pop up. So it sort of mentions about, first of all, it helps emphasize that, that is the parent registering first before the child. So really encouraging that flow, that you're, not just getting the child registered without a parent. And education aspects, vaccinations. So once the patient has completed the questions on that form, they get an opportunity to check everything before they submit it to the practice. So it lists everything they've done. They've got the option to click on change, and then they can accept it and submit their request to register. They get a confirmation with a reference number. They also get to leave feedback. So that's why that service can give genuine feedback about what the patients are saying about the service. And obviously they can celebrate. So, if they've gone through this and registered their whole family, it may have taken a bit of time, but still a lot quicker than often it would be done with paper forms or having to get to your practice. So that's a patient's journey through this. What about us at the practice end? How do we receive that registration form? Well, at the moment, you receive that form via NHS Mail. So it comes back as an NHS Mail like this, where you get the form and the information attached as a PDF, and that's an unlocked PDF, so you could sort of save that into EMIS or System 1. But you also get the same information in the body of the email, so you can actually also cut and paste it as required. So probably you would enter that manually into the patient's record using maybe a template, but you've also got the ability to sort of save that PDF in as well. And it flags at the top of the email important things like, did they use the NHS login? Are they outside the catchment area? There's an optional thing which I'll cover later on, but you can also, as a practice, set up that the patient is automatically notified that they're registered once you've processed a registration. And that's actually a functionality that's not just dependent on using this platform, but I'll cover that later on. So this is how it works currently, but we're also going to talk about ways that this can be done even better, and how the future is that this will come more directly into your clinical systems to reduce your workload even further. So how do patients find the registration with the GP surgery service for your practice? Well, these are the 4 key ways they can do it: through your practice website or your promotion, through the NHS website, they find a GP, the NHS app, or using that paper form that you might give them. So let's show you each of those. So here's a practice website. You might have a page where you're talking through how to register with your practice. So what you would do is you would change the link on your website so that that link is the one that will be given to you, which is a unique link for your practice. And when they click on that, it takes them to the form for your practice. So that's for your practice page. Through the NHS website, find a GP. When you use the search functionality as a patient, you search on your postcode. It shows you practices near that postcode, listing with the closest one first. But what really stands out is when you look at the practice, there's a big, bold link saying register online with a GP surgery. So this is a practice that's set up with a national system. This is a practice that's not. So really, you could say that, will patients more likely to register with ones with that link? And when they click it, they go through to the patient. The patient goes through to the form for your practice and they start that process. Only the national product can create that link. If you're using any other online registration form or solution, you cannot get that link on that page. NHS app is also integrated with that flow. It actually works in a similar way to that Find a GP process. The NHS app integration means that don't you have to enter in the NHS login details again. If you want to see how it works in the NHS app, I've made a little video. If you scan that QR code or look at that link, you can see a walkthrough of how it looks on the NHS app. And then finally, I mentioned that paper form. It really is a professional looking form. So just showing you here. So this is page 1, page 2. This is page 3, page 4. Page 5, page 6. And page 7, page 8. You can download this from Profile Manager and I'll explain that later on. So hopefully I've shown you how it works at the patient end and how it works at the practice end. Now I think we should talk about, well, why should we use it? So this might be your practice. You might be happy with your current processes, happy with your current paper forms. Even if that is the case, I would still urge you, just try it before you make a final decision. You look at the QR code, see what it feels like for the patient, and have a look at the web pages for the registrar with the GP surgery service. That gives you even more information about how it works. But let's look at the situation. So across England, 43% of practices are already live with this product. So that's almost half. And it's similar across London, so 43% as well. And when we look at the breakdown over London, when we look at ourselves in Northwest London, we're at 60%. So 60% of practices in Northwest London are already using it, and only 40% are not. So that's why the hope is that those of you who are attending today can quickly join those 60% and drop out the 40% that are not. And it also explains why, like the final GP side, more than 60% of practices will show up with that link. So what are the benefits for you as a practice? Well, we've touched on them already, but it's that matching that NHS number, managing your catchment area, the accessibility standard. You as a practice no longer have to worry about the headaches of, is the formatting design correct for every patient's needs. You can see it collects feedback from the patient, so it will constantly improve based on feedback. And importantly, it's free. You don't have to find any money to fund this, pay this. It's essentially NHS England digital type product. And then it supports automation. I will cover that later on because this is further bits that can reduce your practice workload even more. But there are some costs that apply to this. The GP contract, we may all have different views or different feelings about the GP contract. It is mentioned in the GP contract, and there is a requirement that all practices go live with both the online and paper form version of the register with the GP surgery service by October 2024. But I would ask us all to just put aside this contract. I would really want you to think that you would want to use it rather than you feel you have to use it. And let's think about the future. The reason they put this in the contract was that actually more practices were using it and quicker than they thought. They set a target of getting like 2,000 practices live by December last year, and they met that target like earlier than they expected. So if the whole country was using the same form, our patients will get really familiar with it. They'll be better at completing it because it becomes familiar. Everyone can recognize that form, that style. They know what's going to be expected. But the other reason I'll say is putting aside the contract, can you afford not to use it? Like I showed on the final GP side, if patients are using this, are they more likely to pick the one with the registration online option? Will that practice get more patients registering than the other one? A bit like when we're booking anything online, and we search for, has a hotel got Wi-Fi or something? Does this become something that's really helpful for the patient? They've come home from work, it's in the evening, they want to just register. That's one they can do now. The other ones, they're not really sure how to do it. They have to click the website, they have to visit the practice. They don't have the time. What's the feedback of practices? So this is some of the feedback for practices just in the area in terms of Ealing Borough. I promise you, us in Ealing, we are not the first doing everything. We're very normal. I didn't pay any of the practices any money. Although there's a rainbow here, there's no pots of gold or anything that I dug up and gave to them. These are genuine bits of feedback from them, but you can see that they're really happy. They like the fact that even the product, there is evolving. And this was in the early days that they started to use it, and they felt that even the branding, the design of it just made things easier for them. And what about patients? Similar, really hugely positive, and particularly about the fact that they just don't have to go to the practice. That whole online aspect. I know we don't get as much snow maybe in London as this photograph, but obviously getting to the practice is can be a difficult thing. But we need to be balanced. It's not all completely positive. What are the limitations of this product? It's standardized. That's the positive about it. It's standardized, but it's also a limiting factor. You can't customize the questions. You can't change a question for a practice need. You can't localize it. You can't add additional questions in. You can certainly give feedback for the team to think, is it something they should consider for the whole country? But on the positive of that, thinking back to that photo I showed you about me trying to talk to an animal and different conversations, do our patients really struggle? Do we ask too many questions? Do we actually get good responses back? Do we use all the responses that they give us, or do we just plug it into a computer or scan it and not really do anything with it? And for a lot of our patients, don't we get a GP to GP transfer of their records? So don't we get that information through other ways as well? And even if we wanted to collect more information, more questions, we could always send a request after getting the main form. We could send a two-way text or message or an email or something to request any more information that we wanted. The second sort of limitation is around NHS login authentication as the only way to sort of verify their identity. They can't upload documents like ID, address. They can't upload sort of any medical documents. But first of all, that is still a positive. We are not meant to sort of require ID and proof of address to register patients. It's in the guidance. And even if we get it from patients, do we actually have the skills to actually check if it's valid? We in a digital world, people can alter things. We're also not meant to store what we get. We're not meant to save it in the patient's records or anything. So we're meant to just instantly delete it. So even if there was a query in the future, we won't have anything to look back at. But even if as a practice you wanted to still collect things, you could always add on a process, ask them to email things across to you, or again, sort of two-way messaging. What's the future? Now, this is a bit technical. The most important and exciting thing on the future is interoperability. So this is about, it doesn't just come to you as an email. It comes into the core GP IT system, so EMIS and System 1, and reduces how many clicks you need to do to process it and put the data in. So work has started on this with the two system providers. There's sort of weekly meetings that are happening. They're going through the design. The hope is that it'll arrive in late this year, 2024. I think always things can be delayed. And it's also about additional functionality that it will automatically sort of update contact details, so we don't have to sort of manually do some of those steps with the PDS as well. So there's other bits that help with that whole workflow. The first phase of that functionality, when it arrives, it will not automate all referrals. It will be a phased approach of taking certain types of registrations that are easier to automate, and then it will increase over time with different phases. If that sounds too slow for you, there are solutions right now of automation providers that can do this for you. And they are providers that have worked with the national team and been supported by that team. They are at cost. They don't come free. They're not funded by the NHS centrally long term, but there's something that definitely you may want to explore. And let's have a look at that. So this is a video from one of the automation providers, and whoops, and you can see the video is literally that was a form, and now a bot. So think of it as a robot that's reproducing what a human would do on EMIS in this case, sort of just typing through, putting all the data into record and processing that registration. So if you want to see more of that demo, that's a QR code for that provider's demo video. And if you want to learn more about the different providers that do this and what is possible, this is on the top right is a QR code that explains more about it. But it can process over 80% of registrations that way. So what happens in that automation is when the form is completed, rather than the form coming to your practice, the form goes to the automated provider. They kind of automate it and put it into your System 1 or EMIS. And here are the sort of key providers. So GP Automate, Health Tech 1 are live, and they're live with System and EMIS 1. System and System 1 and EMIS practices. JIFJAP's a third provider that's due to go live, I think, very soon. And there's a fourth provider who's also working on it. So those are providers that can be considered. But what if you really have thought about this, you've looked at everything, but you're still not convinced, you prefer your existing online registration form or process, don't know if it's going to work for you? Well, first of all, I really hope that this doesn't happen. I hope that you use it. And I do feel actually nearly every practice is in that situation. They go live and they don't look back. But you can control this. When you go into Profile Manager, and I'll show you this later on, you can deactivate it, turn it off. And maybe you could still dip your toes in initially by just dual running. I know that sounds a bit silly or confusing, but you could run more than one solution. You could run your form that you want to run on your practice website initially if you want, so that people discover that. And then you could run the national form if they find it through the NHS app or find a GP site. I mean, I'm not saying that that is ideal, but that could be a way if you're not completely sure and you want to explore this further of how you could go live. So we've covered how does it work? Why should we use it? I really hope then you've now felt that there is a reason why we should use it. And if we are feeling that, we can move on to think, how do we set it up? But before I do, I genuinely would like, I'm happy to pause at this point. If there's anyone that has any question, really from what they've said before, they've got a really big issue or concern, it'd be great to sort of cover that now. I'll just give it a few seconds. I'll assume silence means that everyone's happy and they want to continue. Okay, so let's continue now to show you exactly what you do to go live. Okay, so how do we set this up? And it is as simple as putting a few Lego pieces together. I'm going to show you 13 steps, but I promise you the 13 steps is a bit like me being a perfectionist, thinking of all the things you could do as a practice. You can generally relax. You definitely don't have to do all of them now. You don't have to do them in the order. You could ignore half of them if you wish, and you don't need to remember anything I'm showing you because we'll share the recording and the slides. Step one is the most important step, and even step one you could actually find a quicker way, but I'll tell you what step one is. Step one is just to go live. So you go to Profile Manager. You probably know Profile Manager because you should be using it to manage your NHS website patient reviews. If you're not sure or you haven't got access, here's the support team. So there's an email address, a phone number, but that's the link, the QR code stuff to get to the Profile Manager. Once you go into Profile Manager, you just click on this button here, which is sign up for the Register with a GP Surgery Service. And then it just says to you what you're about to do, a bit of blurb, and it asks you to start now. So it asks you which practice you want to register. Now, most of you are probably managing one practice, so you'd only probably see one practice listed here. If you're a practice manager or managing more than one, you'll see multiple of them. And if you are that kind of manager, I honestly don't know how you're doing your job. It's hard enough managing one practice, but congratulations, or actually maybe not congratulations, I don't know. But if you can't see your practice, it could be because you've moved practice and not the correct practice is listed for you. So you may need to go to the support team to make sure that you're corrected for what practice you're managing. So just select the practice that you're managing to set up and click on OK. And we'll continue. Now it's asking you for the email address that you want the forms to be sent to for your practice. So normally you're going to be adding in your generic email address for your practice, and you click continue. What's actually happening then is they send a verification code to that email address. You just enter that code and click continue. So really just checking that you're not making any typos, that you're definitely receiving the emails, so nothing will go wrong later down the line. Then you've got a couple of questions. Does your surgery offer a language interpretation service for patients? Well, surely the answer is yes for all of us, and particularly in North West London, we've got silent sounds. Are you dispensing surgery? I think the answer is going to be a no for pretty much all of us, if not all of us. And then do you want to offer that question to your patients, that do they want to nominate a pharmacy during their registration? I'd encourage you to say yes, because you saw that flow when they can choose or change their pharmacy. That to me reduces your workload, that you don't have to manage it yourself. And that is it. That is how long it takes you to go live. It asks you just to check what you just requested, the answer to your questions, and you click confirm and complete. It literally takes seconds. And once you've done that, instantly you get confirmation, you get your unique link. Remember I told you that there's a web link, a unique URL link that you get for your practice, for your form. That is that link. And that's probably the only thing that you need to really keep aside. Don't worry, if you lose it or delete the email or message incorrectly, you can go back into Profile Manager and see it. So you get that email confirmation of that too. The Find a GP webpage is normally updated quite quickly and within 48 hours. So then you start to be shown as a practice that can take online registrations through the Find a GP page. But if you want to turn off, like I said, I really hope you never need to do this, but you can go back into Profile Manager. And then when you see your registered services, you can click on View Details, and here it shows you patient access on. You can click on change, and when you click on change, you can toggle these options. You can either turn it off from just to Find a GP page, or turn it off completely, so even that link will never work for any patient who's got that link. And then you can also turn it back on, so you can toggle it back and forth. So that was step one. If you found step one too difficult, or you couldn't sort out your Profile Manager, it can be even quicker than that. I'll show you the email address for the team behind this. If you just email them your details, I'll do it for you. So if you're stuck with Profile Manager, even step one could be easier, but that is probably the most critical step. Step two is about checking your catchment area. This is a bit confusing because you may never have thought about this issue, and it's actually not to do with this product, but 20% of practices are thought to have incorrectly drawn catchment area, and examples are overlapping lines. Have a look at this practice as an example. This is actually a practice in North West London, and you can see it's got these strange extra lines here when it drew out the catchment area. And what that means is sometimes it causes confusion. If a patient was saying this postcode here between these lines, they can't work out, is it in the lines, outside that line? Because it's, which is the correct line. So it can cause issues. One of the quickest way to test this, if you may have a problem, is use the Find a GP webpage yourself for your own practice postcode. Type in the address of a patient as if it was your practice. Your practice should surely be returning as the top option for that patient, because you're literally showing your own address. If it's not returning as a top option, there could be an issue with your catchment area. So that's the first quick check to do. And if you want to know how to manage that, if you do spot an issue, here's a guide that explains more about the catchment area. This is a hub or portal where you can go into to make amendments or corrections to your catchment area and how it's drawn. Some of you might have known that this was previously managed by a submission through SDCS, so Strategic Data Collection Service. Yep, another strange four-letter acronym. But this hub is probably going to be the more useful thing for you, but that's a bit of legacy. So this is something that has got nothing to do with this product, but because the registration process uses this, you can now spot the issue more. So it's something that may need to be corrected, that you may have existed for years and you might not be aware of. And again, this is just to explain the importance of that catchment area drawing also affects, what message the patient gets about, are they outside the catchment area, or can they continue? And your preferences about, are you accepting or not accepting out of area registrations? That's taken from your EDEC submission. So every time you resubmit that, it gets updated. But if you've got any queries or problems, you can email the that email address at the bottom to check or amend your settings. So that's step 2. Step 3 is those emails are coming in to your inbox. You might want to create a subfolder just for registrations. You might want to create an NHS mail rule, so automatically emails from that national team go straight into that folder. Just again, you don't have to do any of this. This is just a tip that might help. Then at this stage, I'd say do a test. Go to your link, pretend to be a test patient, submit a form, and see that you get the email coming in. And this is a photo from a genuine pilot practice. If you want to hear more about that experience, have a look at that QR code. And then now step 5 is those templates we have on System 1 and EMIS. We might want to update them to have the same order of flow as the form. So if we're manually cut and pasting, it's a bit easier because the structure is the same. North West London ICB, we have obviously an IT team that manages our System 1 and EMIS platforms, and they are now working at tweaking and changing that. So you should hopefully get some help with that. NHS Notify. This is something not quite just about this product, and I did mention it early on. You have the ability to automatically send a patient a message that they have been processed for registration. The system will try to send it as an NHS app message. If that fails, it will send it as potentially an email. If they don't have an email address or that fails, it will send it as a text. And if all else fails, there's no other way to contact the patient, it will send it as a letter. And that's done for you. And at the moment, that service is free. How do you do that? You go back into that profile manager. This is why it's good to have profile manager. And again, if you go into your profile for your practice and you say view details, you've got this option here. So we did just cover patient access, which was just about turning it all on and off. Send registration message. If you go to change there, and you've got this toggle option. Do you want us to message patients? You either go yes or no, and that will activate it or deactivate it for you. So that's step 6. Step 7 is those paper forms that we've got. So I showed you the national paper form. It's about replacing the one you've got. And you can again get it by going to Profile Manager and downloading it from there. If you go to that link again, there is this link here that says download the paper form, and that will make sure you've got always the latest version that's there. I've put a link in the top right. That's also a quick link if you want to just get it quickly without even going to Profile Manager. As a side point, there's something slightly different. There is this resource here. If you look at this link or this QR code, you can actually get patient questionnaires in a whole range of languages. So this is like, again, for digitally excluded or health inequalities where, even that paper form I just showed you doesn't really meet their need, and you've got something, and those forms are dual language. They've got English on the left and the other language on the right. So it's actually helpful for your staff to work out, what questions being asked. So something you may find useful as a resource, and you could perhaps even have text messages that, if you send to patients with the link for forms in those different languages, that could be useful. And that's already been set up for you for System 1 practices in North West London in your communications annex. And step 8, further messages that you may want to set up could be useful in the workflow. So, I showed you the NHS Notify service. So hopefully you may not need to even tell them that you've registered them because you could use that service. But there's other messages you may want to do. You may want to have a message with your unique link, perhaps as a parent with a newborn child, and you want to message them saying, look, can you register them? If you send them the link like that, that could be a useful text. And then you may have some message about, that you don't want, you can't, unfortunately can't register them because they're out of your catchment area, and you want to direct them back to find a GP page. So that could be another useful message that you may want to set up. Step 9, your practice web page. So now that you've got that link, you've tested it, you're all ready, it's time to promote it. So if you go to any web page that you're using to explain how to register, just revise your content, delete anything that's no longer needed, and put that link in. Usually, if you're struggling with that, your website provider can help you. All the main providers are very much aware of this national process. So you should find that they're more used to you. Contact them to say, can you help? Now we're on to promotion. So here's a poster that you can use and download. There's actually a waiting room video there. I'm not sure the video is as useful. I personally think that the patient's not likely to be sitting around the waiting room long enough to see the video. I think the poster, though, is useful because you could put it on your front door. So what if people who turn up to your premises when you're shut and they think, oh gosh, I want to register with this practice, they see it, they scan the QR code and they start the process. You could also put them maybe around the reception desk. If people are trying to come in thinking how to register, they may spot it and start doing it, and it reduces that pressure on reception. So I personally think that is useful. Here's some links about how to find those materials. I'm not going to show you the video, but that's potentially how that could look again. How do you do QR codes? Just as a little tip, it's so simple. You can do this within your existing browsers. So if you look at Microsoft Edge and you've got that unique link for your practice, you just paste it into the search bar. You then right-click on any white bit of the web page, and you see this option, create QR code for this page. And there it has. It instantly shows you a QR code. You just download it, and that becomes like a picture that you can paste it into anything. So it's really just takes seconds. And if you get nothing else out of this webinar, do that with everything. Any poster, any material. People can't type in these links into their smartphones. They're just too complex. So and we are increasingly using mobiles rather than desktops. You can do the same with Chrome. Exactly the same if you use a Chrome browser. Very small tip though is the difference with Chrome is you get a lovely little dinosaur there. Now, if you're a dinosaur fanatic, that may be great, but the real thing is that dinosaur is like dead space. So if you want to become creative, put a practice logo in, you can just put something in that center and that QR code still works. Finally, we're really on the home stretch. Titchy tips now. You might have a practice auto reply message on your main email account, like something like this as a message. Maybe just put something like this in, want to register with the practice, visit this thing, because you may get emails from patients thinking, oh, how do I register with you? And they get an auto reply that already starts them off on the journeys. And email signatures. You may have some key staff members, reception leads, admin leads. Do they have a signature? Is it useful to put it on a link? Again, useful when I'm doing auto replies to emails, and it also helpful that they know where the link is. They can cut and paste it out their signature if they need it. So that could be another useful tip. Finally, none of this is going to work without your staff, and you might recognise this practice because it's one in North West London. They were one of the early pilots of the service. This is their team and this is their quote. They genuinely felt that this half the time their staff was spending register their patients. So if your staff test it, if they get behind it, if they understand it, they're going to promote it and they will see some benefits from workload reduction as well. So it gains something for everyone. So we've raced through how does it work? Why should we use it? How do we set it up? So we're now at the end. And we're going to conclude with a space for questions. This last slide just gives you lots of those links that I've shown you throughout all the other slides. Hopefully some of them are useful. And importantly, that email address, that's the team behind the product. So they're there for any questions, any support as well. You're also welcome to contact me. They also can help you if you have any problems, like even if you can't get Profile Manager and you want to just get onboarded really quickly, they can try to speed that up for you as well. Any other questions that have risen up from what we've discussed? What I'm going to suggest then is it's great that there's no questions. It means that hopefully you found what you need to get out of this. I know that we're all busy people, so I'm going to suggest then we can close. You're still really welcome to ping an email, drop any comment if you find out later anything that you didn't quite understand. We will ensure that the slides are circulated rapidly as well to help you on the journey. I would just say it's not a big decision. So many practices using it. It said 60% are using them. It's actually quick to do. So hopefully you found this helpful. But yeah, see what you think of it when you start using it. Okay, great. And I just want to thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.